So from here, without further ado, I am going to kick it over to Dr. Michael Greger. He is the founding member and fellow of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. He's written several books that are all bestsellers on the New York Times list, and he is an internationally very, very well-known speaker with everything he has done for nutrition. He also runs nutritionfacts.org, so hop over there later and take a check at all the free resources they have available. It's an absolutely incredible website. So from here, Dr. Greger, I'm going to let you take the screen. At the very end, I will come back for just a little bit of Q&A, but from here, the show is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be kicking off this Food as Medicine conference. Very much looking forward to the discussion, but let me switch over to my slides so nobody gets seasick watching me wobble on my treadmill here. Allow me to begin on a personal note. There's a picture of me. Take around the time that my grandmother was diagnosed with end-stage heart disease and sent home to die. She already had so many bypass operations, basically got too scarred up inside, confined in a wheelchair, crushing chest pain. There was nothing more they could do. Her life was over at age 65. I then shared about this guy, Nathan Pritikin, one of our early lifestyle medicine pioneers, and what happened next is actually detailed in Pritikin's biography. My grandma was one of the death's door people. Frances Greger, my grandmother, arrived in a wheelchair. Mrs. Greger had heart disease, angina, claudication. Her condition so bad she could no longer walk without great pain in her chest and legs. Within 3 weeks, though, she was not only out of her wheelchair, she was walking 10 miles a day. This is my grandma at her grandson's wedding 15 years after doctors had abandoned her to die. She was given a medical death sentence at age 65, but thanks to a healthy diet, was able to enjoy another 31 years on this planet until age 96 to continue to enjoy her 6 grandkids, including me. That's why I went into medicine. When Dr. Ornish published his lifestyle heart trial years later, proving with something called quantitative angiography that indeed heart disease could be reversed in the majority of patients without drugs, without surgery, just a plant-based diet and other healthy lifestyle behaviors, I assume this is going to be the game changer. I mean, my family had already seen it with their own eyes, but here it was in black and white, published in one of the most prestigious medical journals on the planet, but nothing happened. So wait a second. If effectively the cure to our #1 killer could get lost down some rabbit hole and ignored, what else might there be in the medical literature that could help my patients, but just didn't have a corporate budget driving its promotion? Well, I made it my life's mission to find out. For those of you unfamiliar with my work, every year I read through every issue of every English language nutrition journal in the world. So busy folks like you don't have to. And then compile all the most interesting, the most groundbreaking, the most practical findings to create new videos and articles every day from a nonprofit site, nutritionfacts.org. Everything on the website is free. There's no ads, no corporate sponsorship, no kickback, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything. Just put it up as a public service, as a labor of love, as a tribute to my grandmother. All proceeds I receive from the sale of my books goes directly to charity. All honoraria from speaking engagements like this one goes directly to charity. I just want to do for everyone's family what Pritikin did for my family. New videos and articles every day, and the latest in evidence-based nutrition. What a concept. Okay, so where did Pritikin get his evidence from? Well, a network of missionary hospitals set up throughout sub-Saharan Africa uncovered what may be one of the most important advances in health, according to one of our most famous medical figures of the 20th century, Dr. Dennis Burkitt, the fact that many of our most common and major diseases were universally rare, like heart disease. In the African population of Uganda, for example, coronary heart disease was almost non-existent. So wait a second. Our #1 cause of death, almost non-existent. What were they eating? Well, lots of vegetables and grains and greens, and their protein almost entirely from plant sources. And they had the cholesterol levels to prove it, very similar to what one sees in kind of modern day plant eaters. Say, wait a second, maybe the Africans were just dying early from something else, never lived long enough to have a heart attack. No, here's age-matched heart attack rates in Uganda versus St. Louis. Out of 632 autopsies in Uganda, only one myocardial infarction. Out of 632 autopsies in Missouri, same age and gender distribution, 136 myocardial infarctions. More than 100 times the rate of our number one killer. In fact, they were so blown away, went back, did another 800 autopsies in Uganda. Still, just that one small healed infarct, meaning it wasn't even the cause of death, out of 1,427 patients, less than 1 in 1,000, whereas here, it's an epidemic, as we know. Atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, begins in childhood. By age 10, the arteries of nearly all kids raised on the standard American diet already have fatty streaks in the arteries, the first stage of the disease, and then the plaques start forming in our 20s, get worse in our 30s, and then can start killing us off. In our heart, cause a heart attack. In our brains, the same disease process can cause a stroke. So if there is anyone watching now this morning older than age 10, then the question is not whether or not to eat healthy to prevent heart disease. It's whether or not you want to reverse the heart disease you likely already have, whether you know it or not. But is that even possible? You know, and researchers took people with heart disease, put them on the kind of plant-based diet followed by populations that do not get epidemic heart disease. They're hoping they were able to, slow the disease down, maybe even stop it. But instead, something miraculous happened. The disease started to reverse, to get better. As soon as people stopped eating artery-clogging diets, their bodies were able to start dissolving some of that plaque away, opening up arteries without drugs, without surgery, suggesting their bodies wanted to be healthy all along, but were just never given the chance. That improvement in blood flow on the left, you see that, to the heart muscle itself, was after just 3 weeks of plant-based nutrition. Let me share with you what's been called the best-kept secret in all of medicine. The best-kept secret in medicine is that sometimes, under the right conditions, the body can actually heal itself. If you whack your shin really hard on a coffee table, right, and get all red hot, painful, swollen, and inflamed, but will heal naturally if you just stand back and let your body work its magic, right? But what if you kept whacking shin in the same place every day? In fact, 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It never heal. You go to your doctor, you be like, my shin hurts. Doctor be like, no problem, whip out their pad, write your prescription for painkillers. Still whacking your shin 3 times a day, still really hurts like heck, but it feels so much better. Those pain pills on board. Thank heavens for modern medicine. Okay? It's like when people are given nitroglycerin for, crushing chest pain. Tremendous relief, but you're not doing anything to treat the underlying cause of disease. Our body wants to come back to health if we let it, but if we keep re-injuring ourselves, stabbing ourselves with a fork 3 times a day, we may never heal. It's like smoking. One of the most amazing things I learned in all my medical training was that within about 15 years of stopping smoking, your lung cancer risk approaches that of a lifelong non-smoker. Isn't that amazing? Your lungs can clear out all that tar, and eventually it's almost as if we never started smoking at all, right? Our body wants to be healthy, right? So every morning of our smoking life, that healing process starts until, wham, first cigarette of the day. Re-injuring our lungs with every puff, just like we can re-injure our arteries with every bite, when all we had to do all along, the miracle cure, is to just stop re-damaging ourselves, right? Get out of the way and let our body's natural healing processes bring us back towards health, right? Sure, you can choose moderation and hit yourself with a smaller hammer, but why beat yourself up at all? We've known about this for decades. American Heart Journal, 1977. Cases like Mr. FW here. heart disease so bad, couldn't even make it to the mailbox. Started eating healthier. A few months later, he was climbing mountains, no pain. All right, there we go. Now, of course, there are these fancy new anti-angina drugs on the market now. Cost thousands of dollars a year. But hey, at the highest dose, may be able to prolong exercise duration as long as 33.5 seconds. It does not look like those choosing the drug route are going to be climbing mountains anytime soon, right? See, plant-based diets aren't just safer and cheaper, they can work better. Now, normally at this point, I move on to killer number 2, cancer. Talk about the role diet may play in preventing, arresting, or reversing each of our top 15 killers. But I want to save lots of time for questions. And, in a certain sense, like, what more do we need to know? Right? There's only one diet ever been proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients, a plant-based diet, right? So anytime anyone tries to sell you on some new diet they heard about, do me a favor, ask them one simple question. Right? Has it been proven to reverse heart disease? The most likely reason me and all my loved ones will die? If the answer is no, why would you even consider it, right? If that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the number 1 killer of men and women, shouldn't that kind of be the default diet until proven otherwise? And the fact they also be so effective preventing, arresting, and reversing other leading killers like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming. And so let me just touch on those 2 conditions quickly. Type 2 diabetes, which we can prevent, arrest, and reverse with a plant-based diet, something we've known since the 1930s. A group of diabetics are placed on a type of plant-based diet. Within 5 years, a quarter of them were able to get off insulin. But, plant-based diets tend to be relatively low-calorie diets. I mean, maybe their diabetes just got better because they lost so much weight. I mean, to tease that out, what you'd have to do is switch people to a healthy diet, but force them to eat so much food that they don't lose any weight. Then we could see if plant-based eating has some unique benefits beyond the, all the easy weight loss. Well, we'd have to wait 44 years, but here it is. Subjects were weighed every day, and they started to lose weight. They're made to eat more food. In fact, so much more food. Some of the participants had problems eating it all. They're like, oh, not another salad. Ugh. But eventually they adapted. So no weight loss, despite restricting meat, eggs, dairy, and junk. Okay. So with zero weight loss, did the plant-based diet still help? Well, overall insulin requirements were cut about 60%, and half were able to get off their insulin altogether, despite no change in weight. Oh, wow. How many years did that take? No, 16 days. 16 days later. So we're talking diabetics who've had diabetes as long as 20 years, injecting 20 units of insulin a day, then as few as 13 days later on none. Diabetes for 20 years, then off all insulin in less than 2 weeks. Diabetes for 20 years because no one had told them about a plant-based diet. For decades, they were just 13 days away at any time from being free. Here's patient number 15, 32 units of insulin on the control diet, and then 18 days later on none. Lower blood sugars on 32 units less insulin. That's the power of plants. And as a bonus, their cholesterol dropped like a rock to under 150, again, in about 16 days. Just like moderate changes in diet, usually only will net you modest reductions in cholesterol. How moderate do you want your diabetes, right? Everything in moderation may be a truer statement than many people realize. Our moderate changes in diet can leave diabetics with moderate blindness, moderate kidney failure, moderate amputation, maybe just a few toes or something. Moderation in all things is not necessarily a good thing. There's a famous study published in a journal called Cell Metabolism that purported to show that diets high in meat, eggs, and dairy could be harmful to health, and smoking, supposedly suggesting that people under 65 who ate lots of animal protein 4 times as likely to die from cancer or diabetes. But if you look at the actual study, you'll see that's simply not true. Those eating a lot of animal protein, middle-aged, didn't have 4 times the risk of dying from diabetes. They had 73 times the risk of dying from diabetes. Now, those that chose moderation, only eating a moderate amount of animal protein, they just had 23 times the risk of death from diabetes. The academic institution where the study was done sent out a press release with a memorable opening line: "That chicken wing you're eating could be as deadly as a cigarette," explaining how, look, eating a diet rich in animal proteins may quadruple one's risk of dying from cancer, comparable to what one might get smoking cigarettes. So, what was the response in the academic community to this revelation that diets high in meat, eggs, and dairy could be harmful to health of smoking? Well, one nutrition scientist said it was potentially dangerous to tell people about this study. Why? Well, a smoker might think, hey, why bother quitting smoking? My ham and cheese sandwich is just as bad for me, right? So better not tell anyone about the whole meat and cheese thing. Right? That reminds me of a famous Philip Morris cigarette ad that tried to downplay the risk by saying, hey, you think secondhand smoke is bad, increasing the risk of lung cancer by 19%. Well, hey, drinking 1 or 2 glasses of milk every day, maybe 3 times as bad, 62% increased risk of lung cancer. Or doubling one's risk frequently cooking with oil, tripling your risk of heart disease eating non-vegetarian, or multiplying your risk 6-fold eating lots of meat and dairy. So they conclude, let's keep some perspective here. The risk of lung cancer from secondhand smoke may be well below that of other everyday activities. So breathe deep, right? That's like saying, don't worry about getting stabbed, because look, getting shot, so much worse, right? 2 risks don't make a right, right? Of course, you'll note Philip Morris stopped throwing dairy into the bus once they purchased Kraft Foods. Just saying. All right, let's move on here. High blood pressure, killer number 13 here. Hold on 1 second. Had a little treadmill mishap. All right, we're back in business. Killer number 13. 78 million Americans affected. That's about 1 in 3 adults. And as we age, our pressures get higher and higher, such that by age 60, most of us have high blood pressure. Well, it affects most of us when we get older. Maybe it's less a disease and more just a natural, inevitable consequence of aging. No, we've known since the 1920s that high blood pressure need not occur. Researchers took blood pressure of 1,000 people living in rural Kenya, a typical Kenyan diet, one centered around whole plant foods, corn, bean, vegetables, fruit, greens. Our pressures go up as we age, such that by age 60, most of us are hypertensive, whereas their pressures actually go down. And the lower, the better. The 140/90 cutoff is arbitrary. Of course, it's been dropped since then. Even people who start out with blood pressures under 120/80 appear to benefit from blood pressure reduction. Right? I mean, if we had a pressure 120/80, we get a gold star from our PCP, but the ideal pressure, the no benefit from reducing it further pressure, may actually be 110/70. Wait a second, 110/70, is it even possible to get blood pressures down that low? It's not just possible, it's normal for those eating healthy enough diets and living healthy enough lives. Over 2 years at this rural Kenyan hospital, 1,800 patients were admitted. Oh, how many cases of high blood pressure did they find? 0. Wow. Must have had low rates of heart disease, right? No, they had no rates of heart disease. Not a single case of atherosclerosis, our number 1 killer, was found. Rural China, same thing, about 110/70 their entire lives, 70-year-olds. Same blood pressure, 16-year-olds, right? Now, Africa, China, vastly different diets, but what they shared in common is that they're plant-based day to day with meat only eaten on special occasions. Now, I mean, why do we think it's the plant-based nature of their diets that are so protective? Because in the Western world, as the American Heart Association pointed out, the only group of folks getting it down that low on average are those eating strictly plant-based diets, coming in perfect at about 110/65. This is the largest study of those eating plant-based diets to date, 89,000 Californians, comparing non-vegetarians to so-called semi-vegetarians or flexitarians, those eating meat more on like a weekly basis than a daily basis, compared to those who eat no meat, compared to those who eat no meat except fish, compared to those who eat no meat at all, compared to those who eat no meat, eggs, or dairy. Now, this was an Adventist study, so even the non-vegetarians didn't eat a lot of meat. I tend to eat lots of fruits and vegetables, exercise, not smoke. So it was a really healthy cohort of meat eaters, but still, there appeared to be this stepwise drop in high blood pressure rates as people ate more and more plant-based. Same thing with diabetes, same thing with obesity. So yeah, sure, you can throw the vast majority of your risk out the window, eating strictly plant-based, but it's not all or nothing. It's not black or white. Any movement we can make along the spectrum towards eating healthier can accrue significant health benefits. You can show this experimentally, right? You take vegetarians, you give them meat, pay them enough to eat it, and their blood pressures go up. Or you can do it the other way, take people who already eat meat, remove meat from their diet, and their blood pressures go down in just 7 days. And this is after the vast majority had to stop their blood pressure medications or reduce their blood pressure medications. They had to stop their medications. Like, I mean, once you treat the cause, once you eliminate the disease, you can't be on blood pressure pills with normal blood pressure, right? You drop your pressures too low, get dizzy, fall over, hurt yourself, right? So your doctor has to pull you off the pills, right? Lower pressures on fewer drugs in 7 days. That's the power of plants. So, does the American Heart Association recommend a no meat diet? No, they recommend this low meat diet, so-called DASH diet. So we say, why not completely plant-based? I mean, when the DASH diet was being created, were they just not aware of this landmark research done by Harvard's Frank Sachs? No, they were aware. The chair of the design committee that came up with the DASH diet was Frank Sachs. See, the DASH diet was explicitly designed with the number one goal of capturing the blood pressure lowering benefits of a vegetarian diet, yet contain enough animal products to make it palatable to the general population, right? I didn't think the public could handle the truth. Now, I mean, in their defense, you can see what they were thinking, right? Just like drugs never work unless you actually take them, diets never work at all unless you actually eat them. So they're like, look, how many people are going to go, strictly plant-based, right? So I mean, if they soft pedal the message, come up with some kind of compromise diet, well, you can see how on a population scale, you might do more good. Okay. Tell that to the 1,000 American families a day that lose a loved one to high blood pressure. Maybe it's time to start telling the American public the truth, which is that in the United States of America, most deaths are preventable and related to nutrition. According to the Global Burden of Disease Study, the largest, most rigorous analysis of risk factors published to date, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the number one cause of death in these United States is the American diet. They're also a leading cause of disability. Diet has since bumped tobacco to number 2. Smoking now only kills about 500,000 Americans every year, whereas our diet kills many more. Well, wait, if most deaths in the United States are preventable related to nutrition, right? If diet is the number one cause of death, well, then obviously nutrition is the number one thing taught in medical school, right? I mean, obviously, it's the number one thing your doctor talks to you about at every single visit, right? How could there be this disconnect between the science and the mainstream practice of medicine? Well, let's do a little thought experiment. Imagine yourself a smoker back in the 1950s. And back in the 1950s, the average per capita cigarette consumption was about 4,000 cigarettes a year, meaning the average person walking around smoked half pack a day on average. The media was telling you to smoke. Famous athletes agreed. Even Santa Claus wanted you to smoke. I mean, look, you want to keep fit and stay slender, so you make sure to smoke and eat lots of hot dogs to stay trim and lots of sugar to stay slim and trim. A lot better than that apple there. I mean, sheesh, right? Though apples do connote goodness and freshness, reads one internal tobacco industry memo, which brings up many possibilities for making a youth-oriented cigarette. They want to make apple-flavored cigarettes for kids. Shameless. For digestion's sake, you should smoke. I mean, no curative power is claimed by Philip Morris, but better be safe than sorry and smoke. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere. No woman ever says no. They're so round, so firm, so fully packed. Right? After all, John Wayne smoked them until they got lung cancer and died. You know, back then, even the paleo folks were smoking. And yes, so were the doctors. Now, this is not to say there wasn't controversy within the medical profession. Yes, some doctors smoked Camels, but others preferred Lucky. So there was a little disagreement there. The leader of the U.S. Senate agreed. I mean, who wouldn't want to give their throat a vacation? Not a single case of throat irritation. How could there be when cigarettes are just as pure as the water you drink? Maybe in Flint, Michigan. But don't worry, you do get a little irritated. Your doctor can always write you a prescription for cigarettes. This is an ad from the Journal of the American Medical Association. So when mainstream medicine is saying that smoking on balance may be good for you, when the American Medical Association is saying that, where could you turn back then if you just wanted the facts? What's the new data advanced by science? Well, she was too tired for fun. Then she smoked a Camel. Babe Ruth spoke of proof positive medical science, that is when he still could speak, before he died of throat cancer. Now, if by some miracle there was some kind of smokingfacts.org website back then that could deliver the science directly, bypassing commercially corruptible institutional filters, you would have become aware of studies like this. An Adventist study out of California in 1958 showing that non-smokers may have at least 90% less lung cancer than smokers. But this wasn't the first. When famed surgeon Michael DeBakey was asked why studies back in the 30s linking lung cancer and smoking were simply ignored off the face of the earth, he had to remind people what it was like back then. We were a smoking society. It was in the movies, on airplanes, right? Medical meetings were one heavy haze of smoke. Smoking was, in a word, normal. So, back to our thought experiment. If you're a smoker in the 50s in the know, what do? I mean, with access to the science, you realize that the best available balance of evidence suggests your smoking habit not so good for you. So do you change or do you wait? I mean, if you wait until your physician tells you between puffs to quit, you could have cancer by then. If you wait until the powers that be officially recognize it, like the Surgeon General did in the subsequent decade, you'd be dead by then. Right? It took 25 years for the Surgeon General's report to come out. It took more than 7,000 studies and the deaths of countless smokers before the first Surgeon General report against smoking was finally released in the 1960s. Right? You'd think maybe after the first 6,000 studies, it could give people a little heads up or something. It's a powerful industry. Maybe we should have stopped smoking after the 700th study like this. As a smoker in the 1950s, on one hand, you had all society, the government, the medical profession itself telling you to smoke. And on the other hand, all you had was the science. If you're even aware of studies like this, Okay, well, we can fast forward 55 years. There's a new Adventist study out of California warning Americans about the risk of something else they may be putting in their mouths. Of course, not just one study. You put all the studies together, mortality from all studies, from all causes put together, including many of our dreaded diseases, stroke, cancer, significantly lower among those who are eating more plant-based. So instead of something going along with America's smoking habits in the 50s, imagine you or someone you know going along with America's eating habits today. What do you do? I mean, with access to the science, you realize that the best available balance of evidence suggests your eating habits are probably not so good for you. So, do you change or do you wait? I mean, if you wait until your physician tells you between bites to change your diet, maybe too late. In fact, even after the Surgeon General's report came out, the medical community still dragged their feet. The AMA actually went on record refusing to endorse the Surgeon General's report. Why? Could have been because they were just handed a $10 million check from the tobacco industry? Maybe. Okay, so we know why the AMA may have been sucking up to the tobacco industry, but why weren't individual doctors speaking out? I mean, there were a few gallant souls ahead of their time speaking up against industries killing millions, but why not more? Maybe it's because the majority of physicians themselves smoke cigarettes. Just like the majority of physicians today continue to eat foods that are contributing to our epidemics of dietary diseases. What was the AMA's rallying cry back then? Everything in moderation. Extensive scientific studies have proven smoking in moderation, oh, that's fine. Sound familiar? Today, the food industry uses the same tobacco industry tactics. Misinformation, twisting the science. The same scientists for hire, paid to downplay the risks of cigarette smoke and toxic chemicals, are the same paid for by the National Confectioners Association to downplay the risks of candy, and the same paid for by the meat industry to downplay the risks of meat. Whereas consumption of animal products and processed foods cause at least 14 million deaths around the world every year. So for those of us involved in this evidence-based nutrition revolution, we're talking about 14 million lives in the balance every year. These days, plant-based diets may be considered kind of the nutritional equivalent of quitting smoking. But how many more people have to die before the CDC encourages people not to wait for open heart surgery to start eating healthy as well? Until the system changes, we need to take personal responsibility for our own health, for our family's health, for our patients' health. We can't wait until society catches up to the science again, because it's a matter of life and death. You know, Dr. Williams became president of the American College of Cardiology a few years ago. In an interview, he was asked why he himself follows the same diet he recommends to all his patients, a strictly plant-based diet. I don't mind dying, Dr. Williams replied. I just don't want it to be my own fault. Thank you so much, everyone. Very much looking forward to your questions.
It's a very interesting place to end. I've actually reached out to Dr. Kim Williams to speak for us later this year.
Oh, fantastic. You are in for a treat.
I know. Another amazing quote of his is he says something to the effect of, I'm not going to stop until the #1 cause of death for cardiologists is no longer cardiovascular disease.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it.
We've got a few questions coming in here about additional resources for recipes. And I think this would be a great time just to talk about your website. There are kits that are free to download, healthy eating guides that are evidence-based. Maybe could you tell us a little bit more about that one? Because I know a lot of the people in here with us are looking for more resources, and your website has a ton that are free and downloadable. Where should they go?
Oh, fantastic. Yes, nutritionfacts.org, free nonprofit, science-based public service, daily updates on the latest nutrition research via bite-sized videos, more than 1,000 videos on nearly every aspect of healthy eating, new videos and articles every day, and latest in evidence-based nutrition. We do have, eating guides that you could, have in the, out in the waiting room. Another great resource, there's an organization called Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in DC. They run this Kickstart program. So you can go to 21daykickstart.org. This is something you can mention to a patient in a two-minute visit to get them started on the right track. It's a free program. It starts at the first of every month. Hundreds of thousands of people have done it. It's in a bunch of different languages. Basically, you just join. It's kind of as a social media group, and you get daily tips and advice, and you get answer questions, and basically just kind of hold your hand through a 3-week process in the hopes that by the end of really going all in for 3 weeks, all of a sudden people are feeling better. They have more energy. The better digestion, less painful periods, whatever it is, such that they have the internal motivation to continue going. It's no longer just a doctor wagging a finger in their face. Their own body is telling them how good they feel. Of course, we can take labs before and after and show the dramatic results. And so that's another great resource I encourage people to go to refer your patients to.
Absolutely. And then, do I remember correctly, you have an app called the Daily Dozen?
Oh, yeah. So free app, iPhone, Android, called the Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen. So the How Not to Die, the book, is the first half of the book is just 15 chapters. And each of the 15 leading causes of death, talking about the role diet may play in preventing, arresting, reversing each of the top 15 killers. I was just able to touch on a few today. But I didn't want it to just be a reference book. So the second half of the book is kind of a more practical day-to-day grocery store kind of practical guide, centering my recommendations around a Daily Dozen checklist of the healthiest of healthy foods. I encourage people to fit into their daily routine. So greens every day, the healthiest vegetable; berries every day, the healthiest fruits. A tablespoon of ground flaxseed, quarter teaspoon of turmeric, the best beverages, the best sweeteners, how much exercise to get every day. Basically just trying to inspire people to do some of these healthiest of healthy things. And so you can, check your progress and track it over, just as a kind of a fun way. That's another resource.
Awesome. Question from me. So I read your book, and you poke fun at the educational training quite a bit. We've learned plants are really powerful. Yet it's not really a focus of most education for clinical professionals in various fields today. What's being done to change that? Has any progress been made since your book was released?
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, right? I mean, doctors have a severe nutrition deficiency in education, right? Most doctors just never talk about the impact healthy nutrition can have in the course of illness. So, right, we graduate without this powerful tool in our medical toolbox, right? Of course, there's, also, institutional barriers, time constraints, lack of reimbursement. In general, we're just simply not, paid for counseling people on how to take better care of themselves. Of course, drug companies also play a role in influencing medical education and practice. You can, when's the last time you got taken out to dinner by Big Broccoli? That's that'll give you a sense of the priorities of our system. Unfortunately, there hasn't much changed. Only a quarter of medical schools in the country have a single dedicated course on nutrition. So we have a long way to go, particularly because it's the leading cause of death, and it's a modifiable risk factor, something we can do about it.
Right. Give us a sneak peek. What's the best recipe in your How Not to Die cookbook?
Oh my God. It's really, whatever you're into, but, right now it's soup weather. I don't know how the weather is where you are today, but
6 inches of snow this morning on our driveway, and I'm in the Arctic tundra.
We have this beautiful winter wonderland. Everything's covered in ice outside. So for me, it's soup weather.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of wonderful kind of beans and greens, hearty soups. So actually that's my lunch plans today. Is gonna warm myself up a little bit with some soup.
Yeah, love it. One of the questions I've gotten, I know a lot of people have, there's this kind of fear of all or nothing. So people end up being afraid to ever take the first step. What are some phrases you use with your patients who are coming in with the standard American diet to help them work toward being more plant-based? What are the phrases that really resonate?
That's a great question, right? So yeah, we can never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And so it's really, first of all, figuring out where the patients are. And so, some people, particularly after a diagnosis, new diagnosis, whether it's pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, where, we start discussing, some of our various options. That's, when I may bring up something like 21-day Kickstart program. It's like, let's give it a try, free sample, right? I mean, people can't wrap their minds out of, wait a second, I'm not going to eat a pepperoni pizza ever. Like, no, just 3 weeks, just for the next 3 weeks. Let's just try it out and see what happens, kind of as a little experiment. And then you do labs before and after, really show people the impact their own body can tell them how they feel. And so just diving, going all in, to give them that kind of data point, to give them that information. Actually, it wasn't as hard as I thought. Actually found some really, yummy things, and it's less expensive, and it gives them some more data. Now, but other patients who are more reticent, is what I'll start adding healthy foods to their diet. So I'm like, okay, I want you to eat an apple before every meal, right? And so here they are, just think I'm going to be taking away all their favorite foods. I'm like, no, let's not take away anything. Let's just add some healthy foods. And what happens is it crowds out some of the less healthy options. And, every time I see them, we can start adding, tweaking more and more. And so it's, very kind of easygoing. And eventually, I mean, it doesn't take much, so just adding, like 3 of the healthiest foods: greens, beans, and berries. So the legumes, like, beans, split peas, chickpeas, lentils, like just adding those 3 healthy foods to the daily diet, and just removing from their daily diet, anything with trans fats, which has already basically been done for us, at least here in the States.
Yep.
And number 2, processed meat, right? So bacon, ham, hot dogs, lunch meat, sausage, known human carcinogens, increasing our risk of colorectal cancer. So removing those. And then 3rd, liquid candy, soda. If you just did, remove those few things, added those few things, I mean, you'd really go a long way towards getting the benefits of more complete diet makeover.
Yeah. Another thing, I'm a relatively recent mom. My boys are 3 and 1. And so the 3-year-old is amazing, eats better than most adults, the 1-year-old is making up for that. And I heard a story on the radio the other day. I won't be able to cite it, but it said something to the effect of 50% of the vegetable intake for kids in America is French fries. Where are we headed when that is the status of our nutrition for children?
Yeah, I know, tragic. Unfortunately, it's not much better for adults. Yeah, so actually most calories in the American diet, more than 50%, come from these so-called ultra-processed foods, which really aren't foods at all, right? They're just these kind of industrial formulations of foods that you wouldn't, ingredients you wouldn't actually find in a kitchen even, to kind of mimic the taste, hyper sweet, hyper salty, hyper fatty foods to kind of dig into our natural biological drives. Such that we can't eat just one. And what we're seeing with the childhood obesity epidemic, and then following a diabetes epidemic, is we are facing the first generation of children predicted to live shorter lives than their parents. That's never happened before. We've had this inexorable progress towards improving life expectancy in this country, and for the first time we're slipping backwards. That's in large part to the obesity epidemic, which really all comes down to diet. It's not a matter of kind of you can't outrun a bad diet, right? I mean, we have this sense that it's calories in, calories out. And so it's kind of equally important, exercise versus what we eat. But that's not true at all, because we have much more control over the calories inside of the equation. Most of the calories out is just metabolism. Even if you're exercising multiple times a week, the vast majority is just the normal metabolism that's kind of keep us alive. And the number of moderately obese person doing moderately intense physical activity, like biking, very brisk walking, and burn off about 350 calories an hour or something. But most drinks, snacks, and processed junk are consumed at a rate about 70 calories a minute, right? So it takes 5 minutes of snacking to wipe out a whole hour of exercise, just giving you a sense of how, how skewed it all is. So it really comes down to controlling one's environment, surrounding yourself by healthy food. If you're able to fully control your environment and get junk out of the house,
Yeah.
I mean, if the most calorie dense food in your house is an apple, you get hungry enough, you're going to eat that apple, right? But if you have apple and you have cookies, in the first day or two, you're going to eat the apple, but eventually, right, so you just can't have it in the house. And so just these small little barriers that we can have to take advantage of our our energy conservation drive, to just surround ourselves by healthy foods. And then it's like, oh, I'm hungry, I want something sweet. All I got is a sweet potato. All right, throw it in the microwave. A couple minutes later, a sweet potato, a little cinnamon or something. And look, it's just kind of healthy by default.
Yeah, absolutely. From here, I'm going to flip over to see what kind of questions we've got coming in. I do know a lot of people have questions about how much does organic matter? So grocery stores all have it, but with income constraints for some patients, or also just inability to grow. As you heard, I'm here in Wisconsin. I do garden, but right now there's 6 inches of snow outside, so it's a long time for me until my garden will be up and running.
That is indeed the case. Right. Yeah. You can grow a few herbs on your windowsill, but you ain't gonna produce enough calories for anybody. Right. So in How Not to Die, I talk about this modeling study that suggests that if even half of Americans ate a single more serving of fruits or vegetables every day, we would prevent 20,000 cases of cancer every year. That's how powerful fruits and vegetables are. But because they were talking about conventional fruits and vegetables, pesticide-laden fruits and vegetables, they estimated that the additional pesticide burden on the U.S. population would cause 10 extra cases of cancer. So overall, we would just prevent 19,990 cases of cancer if we ate just a little more fruits and vegetables. That gives you a sense of the tremendous benefit versus the tiny bump in risk. Yeah. And I say, wait a second, why accept any risk at all? Have all benefit, no risk by choosing organic? Great. But we should never let concern over pesticides prevent us from stuffing our face with as many fruits and vegetables as possible.
Love it. From here, we've got conflicting opinions on seed oils versus olive coconut oil. What's inflammatory in those? Which ones are people supposed to be recommending?
Oh, well, so, ideally, we would get all of our macronutrients from whole foods, right? And so instead of taking protein powders, right, whole foods. Instead of oil, we would be getting, our fat from whole food sources like nuts, seeds, avocados, and carbohydrates. Instead of, getting it from, from table sugar or corn syrup, right? We'd get it from, sweet potatoes and beets and fruit. And so, that's really the goal. So there's really no reason that we need to use oil. Oil is actually the most calorie concentrated food available to us. So it's about 120 calories per tablespoon. So a little drizzle, all of a sudden you added tons of calories. Even butter has fewer calories because it has a little water in it. And so, 100 calories, that's like the amount of, calories you might see in a couple of cups of blackberries, for example. You ate a couple of blackberries for dessert. Wow, that would fill you up, right? But the little drizzle of oil, you wouldn't even feel it in your stomach, right? You'd just be a little glistening on the pasta or something. Yet same amount of calories. And so they're kind of empty calories. It's kind of like the oils, like the sugar of the carbohydrate kingdom. Is the oil is the empty calories of the fat kingdom. Whereas if you got that same amount of oil instead of in walnut oil from actual walnuts, you get the plant protein and the fiber and all the minerals and all the other stuff that would be missing from the oil. So I encourage people to try to eat whole foods as possible. Say, wait a second, how am I going to saute? It's amazing. You can actually saute in water or broth or wine or any other kind of liquid. Just keep things from sticking, and remarkably, you really won't kind of tell the difference. And for those of you saying, well, wait a second, what about my deep fryer? Well, there's air frying technology now. You can, make some sweet potato fries, put them in some salt-free ketchup, and you're good to go.
Oh, this is a good one. We have, so plant-based, we're going to call it a trendy phrase, although we all here agree plants are super powerful, but there's now plant-based alternatives to pasta and to meats. And these are really just processed foods that are repackaged to make it sound like they're healthy on the outside. What are we learning now about these up and coming kind of plant-based alternatives, especially for like meats, where it's the plant-based burger patty or the plant-based brat?
Sure, sure. Yeah, so I have a bunch of videos where I actually compare the nutritional value of something like the, Beyond Burger or the Impossible Burger versus kind of a regular beef burger versus something more kind of whole food plant-based like a black bean burger or something, and actually go through and look at the fiber content and the sodium content and the saturated fat content. Definitely better, step in the right direction, right? So, again, for these people that just can't go all kale and quinoa tomorrow. Like, that's just not going to happen. You're like, all right, well, let's start, the next barbecue. Let's just substitute this for that. A lot of people can't even tell the difference. It's the same kind of mouth feels and textures that they grew up with. Not everyone can make that shift as abruptly. And so definitely I view these as stepping stone foods, right? So all of a sudden we're talking zero cholesterol, usually significantly less saturated fat, tends to have the same or even more sodium, but actually has low fiber. So definitely better. I just don't want people to stall there. I want people to continue to improve their diet, move towards those whole foods, but I do see that as a positive step on the way there. And so there actually have been studies. So in Stanford, Chris Gardner did a study where randomized people to kind of beyond meat products like, plant-based chicken, plant-based sausage, plant-based burgers versus the regular thing, and a crossover study, and found, significant improvements, LDL cholesterol, significant improvements in TMAO, which is a toxic byproduct of the carnitine in meat. But didn't see any difference in blood pressure. Well, no, duh, because they didn't drop their sodium intake. So didn't get the full benefits of plant-based eating, but certainly saw some benefits. So I'm a big fan of these products, but just as a transitional food towards even eating healthier later on down the road.
All right, so we got a ton of questions. Want to hear more about the research for pescatarian diet? Oh
yeah, no, absolutely. So the research is excellent for pescatarians. Part of the reason is that pescatarians tend to be doing it for health, right? Why would someone cut out meat but not fish? They tend to do it for the health. Whereas a lot of people, particularly young people who are eating more plant-based, they're doing it for for non-health reasons. They're doing it for like environment or greenhouse gases or animal welfare or something. And so, in some respects, their data in these epidemiological studies isn't as good because, they're just eating French fries and beer, plant-based, but not particularly healthy. Whereas the pescatarians are doing it with this healthier mindset and tend to eat more vegetables and higher proxies of plant-based eating, like higher vitamin C intake, higher fiber intake. These are two components of plant foods in general. So we definitely see some benefits. As we saw in that the Adventist 2 study, those cutting out all meat, including fish, tended to do better than those maintaining fish in their diet. But those just eating fish did significantly better, even than the semi-vegetarians who were only eating meat once a week, at most once a week. Definitely, again, step in the right direction. Would be a tremendous advantage over standard American diet, but we all can improve our diets. Diets, it's like a zero-sum game. Like every time we put something in our mouth, it's a lost opportunity to put something even healthier in our mouth, right? So putting banana in our oatmeal, great. Putting blueberries in our oatmeal, even better, right? It's like, wait a second. I mean, we can always kind of up our game. And so would encourage people to continue down that path.
Love it. We got a very specific one here. People want to know more about the impacts of a plant-based diet on Parkinson's.
Oh, yeah,
You had a
no, that's
question
a
on that.
fantastic question. And so the number one dietary risk factor for Parkinson's is dairy consumption. There's a recent meta-analysis finding significantly higher risk. We're not sure exactly why, whether it's the galactose, whether it's the changes in uric acid, whether it's like the pesticide and some of these toxic industrial pollutants that build up in the dairy supply. But whatever it is, in terms of preventing Parkinson's, that's the most powerful thing we can do in terms of our diet. But what if we already have Parkinson's? What can we do to treat it symptomatically? And I have a series of videos coming out on Nutrition Facts that are talking about interventions involving legumes. So, for example, faba beans actually have the equivalent of levodopa in them.
Yeah.
They have the both the carboxylase inhibitor plus the precursor. So you actually get improvement in symptoms eating fava beans. In fact, and something else important in terms of dietary treatment of Parkinson's is late day protein restriction. So we eat our protein for breakfast and lunch and not for dinner, because some no, sorry, opposite. It's called protein redistributed diet. We want protein for supper, not for breakfast, lunch. Why? Because the large neutral amino acids found in high protein foods blocks, the tryptophan across the blood-brain barrier, and so actually interferes, and so we get an increase in symptoms. But it doesn't matter if you're sleeping when that happens. So we want to push our protein-rich foods to the evening, helping with symptoms. Trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, that would be the main thing. Protein redistribution, plant-based foods, and legumes as primary protein sources, particularly, and get to know faba beans, which was a surprise to me.
So this one I think we partially answered earlier, but a few people have questions specifically about organic meat or dairy and how that would impact health versus just eating plant-based foods. And I think you said earlier, basically, every shift towards more plants is a good shift, but
yeah, we should. So, the lower we can eat on the food chain, the better. And so organic animal ag is one step up, so they're kind of natural herbivores, but that's better than conventional meat because, which we learned from the whole mad cow crisis. If you remember back with bovine spongiform encephalopathy, we learned that, why did Oprah say she'd never eat another burger again? Because she learned that we were, taking the slaughterhouse byproducts and feeding them back to farm animals, which we continue to this day.
right.
And so it turns out that we've turned kind of natural herbivores into carnivores and cannibals. And so they're actually higher up on the food chain. They're like all of a sudden they're like the eagles and the polar bears, and they build up the PCBs and DDT and some of these toxic pollutants that were banned decades ago in some cases, but still found throughout the food supply and will for many centuries. And so eating lower on the food chain is better. So organic would be better than conventional, but eating the plants directly would lower our exposure most to these industrial pollutants.
Absolutely. Got about 2 minutes left. So this one, I think people want to hear a little bit more strategies for motivating patients to eat plant-based diet. Simply giving patients information doesn't always lead to behavior change. So we mentioned earlier, I think you said the 21-day kickoff was the free resource that is kind of one of your go-tos.
Yeah. So I encourage people to, it's such a short clinical encounter, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Usually that you want to kind of leave them with materials to kind of mull over. And so there's some great documentaries out now. One of my favorites is called The Game Changers, which I was honored to be kind of scientific advisor for. And it's, it was produced by the Titanic guy. What's his name? He has the new Avatar movie, whatever.
I'm terrible with movie people.
But it's like really, it's a high end, full-length documentary, and just beautifully done and very inspirational, and something like that I'd recommend. And it's
Yeah.
on all the streaming services, and so they can watch that, and then just kind of mull over some of these things. There's some books and websites, of course, you can push people to, but particularly for younger individuals who have the time and not battling currently chronic disease, where you feel like you have some time to move them, and it's not as much of a kind of an urgency over getting the crap out of their diet.
Yeah. All right. And then last one, our biggest complaint about plant-based diet is how time consuming it is to eat 3 meals a day of wholly plant-based. How do we fix the time commitment, Doc?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of batch cooking.
Yeah.
So Sunday making a big batch of everything you need. So if you're building your meals from whole grain, whole intact grains and legumes and stuff, you can just make a big batch. How many meals do I have this week? What do I got to pack for everybody? And making big batches. I'm a big fan of these electric pressure cookers, like Instant Pots. You just put it on, press a button, forget about it, turns itself off. And then you can apportion it. And then it's, it becomes really a quick matter once you have all the kind of basic ingredients sitting there. And then, having, if you look at my freezer, it's half frozen berries, half frozen greens. I encourage people to eat green leafy vegetables a day, but, they go bad. They only last a few days. But in the freezer, they're pre-chopped, pre-washed, often less expensive, and actually can be fresher because they're frozen the day of picking, whereas the collard greens have been sitting on the shelf for a ship for a week or something. And so it's really kind of a win-win-win all around, and quickly kind of microwaved in kind of any dish. And canned beans, super convenient. No salt added canned beans. These are the kind of things that that make life a lot easier for those of us who are so busy.
Yes, they do. Well, we are going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time joining us today. Your session was amazing, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Oh, I had a fantastic time. Good luck with the weather out there.
Thank you.